Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this special Christmas edition of Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. Well, World War I was called the war to end all wars. In the classic novel, All Quiet on the Western Front, the German author and veteran wrote that the war caused the annihilation of all human feeling. Yet out of that same conflict came a legendary Christmas celebration that reminds us of the amazing depth of humanity. John Jessup reports.
To the glory of God.
Each year, Andrew Hamilton lays a wreath at the World War I monument in his small English village, a tribute to the grandfather he barely knew. What do you remember of him?
I just remember an old man who shouted a lot because he was deaf, and he'd lost his hearing really during the First World War. So he was really quite frightening. And then when I read his diaries, I was amazed, I suppose, at the life that he'd been involved in. This one is the original one, which he would have kept in his top pocket.
As Hamilton writes in his book, Meet at Dawn Unarmed, his grandfather, Captain Robert Hamilton, kept diaries from 1913 to 1950. Most years were fairly mundane, with one remarkable exception, 1914.
Wednesday, the 5th of August, wire to mobilise at 5:30 a.m.
Hamilton was part of the initial wave of British troops in what came to be known as the First World War. The general consensus at the time was the fighting would be over by Christmas. Just one day earlier, German troops had invaded Belgium, and then England joined the fight. Ironically, the leaders of the opposing sides were first cousins, Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm II and King George V of England. Caught in the middle, the tiny country of Belgium.
This very provincial, rural area of Belgium was almost at the center of the world attention. I grew up listening to stories of elderly people in my village that had to do with the war.
German troops cut a path of destruction through Belgium into France. Allied forces stopped them outside of Paris, pushing them back, but only so far. A stalemate ensued, with both sides digging in, literally. Trench warfare on the Western Front had begun.
September the 18th, several men killed and wounded in the trenches by shell fire. This was, without exception, the most miserable night ever spent. I stood all night in water up to my ankles and the rain pouring down.
This is one of the original trenches from more than 100 years ago. Two parallel zigzagging lines built by the German and Allied forces stretching more than 450 miles. In some places, the opposing armies were only 50 yards apart.
Both parties have dug in, and the cold is coming in. And so all of a sudden, the first enemy is not your opponent to the other side of the no man's land, but it's the cold.
By the end of November, there were over 1.5 million casualties on the Western Front. As the stalemate continued, it became clear the war would not be over by Christmas. The outside world pushed for an official Christmas truce, including Pope Benedict IV, who asked that the guns may fall silent, at least upon the night the angels sang. British General Horace Smith Dorrien, however, issued a directive forbidding fraternization, saying it destroys the offensive spirit in all ranks.
December the 24th, we marched up to our trenches, a little downhearted to spend Christmas Day in them.
Artist Bruce Bairnsfather was machine gun officer in Captain Hamilton's Royal Warwickshire Regiment. He recounted his war experiences in the book Bullets and Billets.
I remember at the time being very down on my luck about this, as everything in the nature of Christmas Day festivities was obviously knocked on the head.
But the Germans didn't let war stop their celebration. They displayed Christmas trees in their trenches, and on December 23rd, held a church service in a bombed-out sugar refinery. Schoolteacher Kurt Zemisch served in the 134th Saxon Regiment. Like Hamilton, he kept a diary during the war.
We sang the song, This is the day that the Lord has made. The celebration moved many to tears.
I think Christmas in those days was much more an important festival in the German culture than it was in French or Belgian or Anglo-Saxon countries.
I ordered my men that on Christmas Eve and on Christmas Day, no shots were to be fired from our side if it could be avoided.
Then something extraordinary happened.
No sooner had we settled into the trenches, we and the Brits tried to draw attention to each other.
The spirit of Christmas began to permeate us all, and we tried to plot ways and means of making the next day, Christmas, different in some way to others.
An Englishman called over to our trenches. "I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year." To which I replied to him and his comrades, "Thank you very much. I wish the same to you."
After months of vindictive sniping and shelling, this little episode came as an invigorating tonic and a welcome relief to the daily monotony of antagonism. On Christmas morning, I woke very early. It was a perfect day, a beautiful, cloudless day.
December the 25th, a day unique in the world's history. I met their officer and we arranged a local armistice for 48 hours. As far as I can gather, this effort of ours extended itself throughout the whole line as far as we could hear. It's Christmas time, the soldiers under his command have had a rotten time, and he was deeply Christian himself, so it was natural to allow it to happen.
So started the Christmas celebration, the celebration of love, when enemies became friends for a short time.
Here they were, the actual, practical soldiers of the German army. There was not an atom of hate on either side that day.
Although fighting continued on most of the Western Front, the unauthorized truce extended along virtually all of the 27-mile length of the British line. Both sides helped bury their dead. They exchanged gifts like food, tobacco, and buttons, and in some sectors, they even played soccer in no man's land.
It makes them happy because they feel human again. Whereas the industrial warfare often reduces them to cannon fodder, often reduces them to killing machines.
This was all so beautiful, yet strange. I will never forget this Christmas celebration.
The last I saw of this little affair was a vision of one of my machine gunners, who was a bit of an amateur hairdresser in civil life, cutting the unnaturally long hair of a docile German.
A very Merry Christmas, and a most extraordinary one. But I doubled the sentries after midnight.
There would be 3 more Christmases on the Western Front before the war came to an end, but nothing quite like this would ever happen again. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle later described it as one human episode amid all the atrocities which have stained the memory of the war. John Jessup, CBN News, reporting in Flanders, Belgium.
All right, thank you very much, John. Well, let's go inside the White House for a look at this year's spectacular Christmas decorations. First Lady Melania Trump selected every detail personally, and she said it pays tribute to the majesty of the United States. Here is White House correspondent Ben Kennedy.
America the Beautiful is this year's theme as the Trump family celebrates their 4th Christmas at the White House. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas at the White House, and it all began with the arrival of this tree from West Virginia. The 18.5-foot Fraser fir traveled from Dan and Bryant Tree Farm in Shepherdstown to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The official White House Christmas tree sits in the Blue Room, with decorations from students across the country who were asked by the National Park Service to highlight what captures the spirit of their home state. First Lady Melania Trump tweeted, "Together we celebrate this land we are all proud to call home." A team of volunteers helped deck out the People's House with 62 trees, 106 wreaths, 1,200 feet of garland, 3,000 strands of light, and 17,000 bows. The trees include this one in the Red Room, decorated to recognize first responders and frontline workers battling the pandemic. Another in the East Wing honors Gold Star families. It pays tribute to American heroes and their families who walk beside them in service. Ribbons honor individuals who gave their life for this country. The White House Library is decorated in recognition of this year's 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. The First Lady wrote, "The trees are adorned with ornaments featuring notable women in our nation's history." The state dining room features the traditional gingerbread White House, which took 400 pounds of dough and icing to complete. For the first time, it includes the Rose Garden, recently renovated by the First Lady. Even cookies will be waiting for Santa when he stops by. Now, the First Lady deciding the theme dates back to 1961, when Jacqueline Kennedy decorated the White House in a Nutcracker Suite theme. Ben Kennedy, CBN News.
Thanks, Ben. And just ahead on Faith Nation, a look at the truth and the accuracy of the Bible.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel. Now available at cbnradio.com.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Christians everywhere celebrate the miracle of the virgin birth on Christmas Day. But in a growing secular society, more Americans than ever deny such miracles. They also question the accuracy of the Bible. Paul Strand spoke with 3 experts with evidence that believers have it right.
These days, many Christians, especially college-age students, find their faith in God and the Bible questioned, if not downright assaulted.
Sometimes they'll have a professor that's going to outright challenge why they believe what they believe and say, look, what you believe is actually a fairy tale.
Not so, according to 3 of the world's top biblical experts, who told CBN News there's good reason to have faith in your faith.
The faith is very, very defendable. That's why it's lasted for 2,000 years.
They point to how even respected non-believers wrote about Jesus.
16 total historians, apart from the scripture, everything else, that reference Christ. Almost everything about Christ we can find out without ever going to the New Testament.
The fact is, surviving manuscripts we have for almost any ancient writings were produced hundreds of years after those original writings. Jonathan Morrow tells students at the Impact 360 Institute there's more evidence that Jesus lived than Julius Caesar, yet no one doubts Caesar existed. Also, a rule is the closer in time the writer was to events, the more likely his account is accurate. Peter, John, and James lived with Jesus.
John said, what our eyes have seen, what our ears have heard, what our hands have handled is what we're declaring unto you. In other words, we were eyewitnesses. We were there.
And Morrow points out Paul and Luke interviewed them and knew many others who witnessed Jesus' life, death, and resurrection.
When you're doing history, you want early and you want eyewitnesses. And the gospel writers give you both. They investigated everything carefully. They have the ring of truth to them. They include embarrassing details.
Another understanding among scholars?
What the age does, they find the closer the manuscript to the original, less chance of error or miscopying.
But McDowell explains no original copies exist of the most well-respected and accepted ancient works.
When you look at Greek and Roman historians like Herodotus and Tacitus and Livy, those are hundreds of years later, 500, 600, 700 years after the fact.
Bible manuscripts, though, get closer to the original work than any other.
We've got manuscripts and fragments that show up within 35, 40 years of the time when they were written. Why does that matter? It means there's not enough time for error in mythology to corrupt the message of what's going on there.
Second, the more manuscripts you have, the easier it is to reconstruct the original.
Here, the surviving ancient copies or pieces of the Bible way outnumber all others.
66,420 some manuscripts and scrolls.
McDowell says second place is Homer's The Iliad with just 1,800.
We do trust Homer. How much more so should we trust the New Testament documents?
With so many more copies, no surprise there'd be occasional errors. And critics claim there are some 400,000 mistakes or variants in the Bible. Well,
99% of those 400,000 or so number evaporate. Simple spelling errors, word order.
Like H-O-N-O-R, H-O-N-O-U-R.
But none of those texts that are in question affect any central teaching of Christian doctrine or practice.
And Bach and Morrow explained to students many of the so-called contradictions in the Bible are just different ways of telling the same story.
And difference does not equal contradiction, it's just difference.
Doubters have a hard time believing that the Bibles we're reading today could accurately reflect the actual words written by the authors so many centuries ago. But McDowell explains how for Jewish scribes, copying books like Genesis and Exodus was holy work and strictly controlled.
4,000 regulations the scribe had to follow to guarantee accuracy.
Monks had tight rules for copying as well. Another reason to trust the Bible, archaeology and related research have time and again shown the Bible's true and Bible skeptics wrong.
Archaeology has probably cleared up already over half of all what appeared to be alleged discrepancies in the scriptures.
Skeptics would say there's no record of a Nazareth, so the New Testament can't be true, and no record of the Hittites, so the Old Testament can't be true. Well, archaeology and associated research shows both existed.
But now you can go to Harvard or anywhere else and study the Hittite language.
Finally, there's the proof of logic. The apostles kept saying to their opponents,
"You know what I'm talking about. You were there."
McDowell points out that's a crazy thing to do if you're making the whole thing up.
They appealed to the knowledge of their opponents for the facts of which they talk about. To me, that's one of the best tests of truth historically.
Bach asked what better proof the earliest disciples weren't making it all up than the fact they almost all were martyred for it.
You don't die knowingly for something that you know you made up.
Paul Strand, CBN News.
Fascinating. Thanks, Paul. Well, still ahead, nuns, known for some really great cheese and their heart for prayer. An update on the Gouda nuns, their famous cheese and dedication to pray in these difficult days.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Tikkun Olam,
This is our nature as a country.
to make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears. Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com to get your copy today.
Welcome back. Well, a few years ago, CBN News introduced you to a group of nuns who do two things very well. They pray and they make Gouda cheese, of all things. Well, in 2020, they're still at it. And as Heather Sells shows us, they have a special burden to pray for those serving and suffering in this pandemic.
This is the heart of this cloistered Trappist nun community, gathering for worship and prayer 7 times a day, starting at 3:15 in the morning. And this is the Cheese Barn, where the 12 sisters at Our Lady of the Angels make close to 20,000 pounds of Gouda every year. Most of their $250,000 business is mail order, although some local shops drive out monthly for the cheese their customers crave.
The flavor's great. It's on the mild end in terms of intensity, but it's delicious and really versatile. You can use it for cooking, or you can just nosh it with salami and olives and bread.
When they started, the nuns knew nothing about how to make cheese. Today, they literally cannot keep up with the demand from food connoisseurs around the country.
It sort of sells itself. People get it as a gift. And they call and they say, could I order some of this cheese?
Sister Barbara is one of the original 6 who was sent by a large monastery in Massachusetts to start anew on this gorgeous piece of land near Charlottesville, Virginia. The goal, follow the centuries-old rules of St. Benedict by building a life based on prayer and engage in manual labor to support themselves. Happily for the sisters, the property they bought already featured a cheese-making facility.
We were so naive, we thought it'd be so simple. You have some of this equipment here, and you just get some milk and a few lessons and just make some cheese.
But the sisters persevered, and they got it right, really right. They allot 30-some days a year to make the Gouda, and everyone pitches in. Sister Maria is the designated cheese cook. She must manipulate some 6,000 pounds of pasteurized milk with a little culture and rennet into several hundred wheels of cheese. It looks easy, but like any good recipe, it's all about precision, getting the correct temperature, cutting the curds at just the right moment, heating them, then draining the whey, and finally pressing the cheese. Over the years, the sisters have not only perfected their technique, they have never bungled a batch. That's almost unheard of. The sisters say prayer is a big part of their work, from making the cheese to sending it out.
While I'm doing it, I'm really praying for the people who are gonna eat that cheese. I mean, I know every family, every person have problems.
For every 5 cheese orders that come in the mail, at least 1, maybe out of every 4, 1 will have a request for prayers.
Prayer is also the reason the nuns say they won't grow their business.
People will come in and say, well, you sold out last year, so you're going to make more next year, aren't you?
What is happening here? A seeking after the Lord that is visibly discernible.
It's fun to see the nuns, and they're so, kind and calm and mellow. It sort of slows you down a little bit.
When they're not in the chapel or making the cheese, the nuns do admit to eating it, often. And there is a preferred method.
You toast a piece of bread so that the bread is kind of crispy. And then you put a couple thin slices of cheese on, put it in the microwave for 25 seconds.
Flash forward to 2020, and the sisters say the pandemic has made them even more conscious of the need to pray. They're especially mindful of healthcare workers and those who have lost a loved one. A new puppy, Skippy, has added joy to their lives, but otherwise, their days continue as they always have, full of prayer and ministry opportunities in simple 2-pound wheels of cheese. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thanks, Heather. A holiday tradition with a COVID twist. That story next.
It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
Watch On the Home Front today at 2:30. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
Finally tonight, the pandemic might be putting a hold on normal holiday traditions, but it didn't stop the New York Metropolitan Opera from performing a Christmas concert, though it looks a little different from years past.
And he shall reign forever and he shall reign
Members of the Met Opera Chorus donned face shields and followed guidelines on social distancing to perform a pop-up concert on the steps of New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. Some sounds of the season, and that does it for Faith Nation this evening. We want to wish you a very Merry Christmas from all of us here at Faith Nation and CBN News. Have a great night.